Welcome to the Raising Mom podcast, a ministry of Coastal Church, hosted by mother and daughter Cheryl Koop and Jen Ennis. A roundtable conversation by moms for moms, where we keep it real, honest, and always focused on Jesus.
Welcome to the Raising Mom podcast. This season, we feature some really amazing women and mothers who truly changed the world. And so we're honored to welcome our senior pastor and my dad, Pastor Dave Koop, for this very special Raising Mom Father's Day episode. So while we would normally approach the conversation of godly parenting from the perspective of a mom, we're really excited to look at things today through the eyes of a father. Dad, it's so great to have you on Raising Mom today. Not only are you my dad, like I said, but you are our senior pastor. And so I'm really excited just to talk to you today about what being a father means to you and a little bit about your journey as a dad. So I want to start it off with a question. Did you always want to be a dad?
Oh, Janet, so good to be with you. Love this podcast, Raising Mom podcast, and how it's helping so many moms and dads. I know dads sneak in and are listening to this as well. So to all the moms and dads out there, so good to be with you today. Did I always want to be a dad? Great question. No, I don't think I always wanted to be a dad. I didn't grow up thinking about being a dad a lot until I got married. And then I began to think about being a dad. I think, girls grow up playing with dolls and so forth and rocking a baby in their arms. And I didn't think much about it until I got married. And then I thought, wow, I really want to be a dad. So that thought came to me probably later in life than it would have been for, let's say, the average woman. I think I thought about it later.
And then your oldest child came, and of course, you just really wanted to be a father.
My oldest child came, and I was like, wow. I do remember, Jen, just being so amazed at holding you when you were born and just thinking, wow, this is so much better than I thought it would be. So, yeah, it's an exciting season, exciting moment for any man when he realizes that he is a father. And as we know that, father is more than just fathering a child. Fathering is more than a sperm. Fathering is being able to have a person in your life that you have the privilege of raising and loving.
Oh, Dad, that's awesome. And, for those who don't know, you have 4 kids. So me, and then I have 3 siblings. And you've always been a great dad. Who influenced you the most in your role as a dad? Or maybe were there different seasons where people influenced you in certain seasons of your role as a dad? But is there one person that you can think of, you're like, wow, they were the person I really aspired to be like?
I was privileged to have a great father. And the thing with dads is you don't often realize how much they've influenced you until later on in life. And I didn't realize how much my father, Henry Koop, influenced my life until I was a dad. And then I began to think back, how did my dad do this? It was then that I realized my dad had a really consistent faith in God, which influenced me in my parenting and my walk. He had an integrity. He always kept his word, treated people fairly. He treated us fairly as children. I never saw him fight with my mother. They never showed us that. He always disciplined us fairly, and he had an incredible work ethic. He had a humility about him, and he genuinely cared for other people. And I didn't really see his influence in my life until I was a dad. And sadly, and I regret this, I wish I would have been able to express to him more how much he did influence my life. So number one certainly would be my own father, who influenced me more than I realized in being a dad. And I'm thankful for that. Not everybody has that, but I was privileged to have a dad example. And lots of times people don't have a good father, earthly father, but God will always bring you somebody else who can be a role model as a father for you. And I've looked at other people as well to how do they do that in different seasons of parenting. You look to other people to how are they doing that? How are they relating to their children? But number one, certainly with my own father.
And that's so great. He was a great example. I think I like probably hearing you talk about him since he's passed, especially, and just hearing the stories that you tell about him and how he did influence your life. I like listening to that. I like listening to the stories of who he was and how he shaped you. What surprised you or continues to surprise you the most about being a dad?
Surprised me, I think, well, talk to you because you're my daughter here. So one of the things that surprised me was, I thought, Jen, for some reason, when you are raising children and so forth, when they get to be about 18 to 20, they're going to, the load of parenting will go away, and not in a negative way, but it's just like
surprise.
It changes. You have seasons. And I remember, my grandparents saying, well, you're always in our lives. We're always praying for you. I thought, oh, yeah, well, sure, whatever that means. And I thought, but it's true. You carry your children with you all your life. And of course, responsibility changes. When a child is born, you're changing diapers, you're feeding them, and they really need your intimate physical attention. But as life goes on, I think I was surprised that how much I continue to father and want to father in the seasons of life as they go on. It changes because your children are now mature. They're not under your roof anymore. It's a different season. But that surprised me. That I wish, in hindsight, I could have prepared more for that. To think longer term, not just think, when they leave the nest, then it's over. No, you're not finished fathering by any means. You're maybe entering into a more impactful way of fathering than you even realize. So I think that surprised me, that the influence, the need to continue to father in the next season, the next chapters of life.
Some of the moms who listen, they have kids who are teenagers who are maybe late teens or graduating. And, you made a really interesting point where you said, I wish I had maybe thought into those adult years. And what would you say to them as far as this is what you could expect going into having adult children? This is what maybe you should be prepared for. Is there anything that you would say to those moms or dads?
One of the best piece of advice that we had, and I don't know who told us this, but someone once said to us, always pray and ask God for somebody who is one season ahead of you. So my advice would be, get somebody one season ahead of you in life who would be a great example for you. Somewhere along the line, we picked that up, Cheryl and I, and God's always been faithful to bring somebody one season ahead of us. So I would say, who is that person you can go to, ask questions, and say, here's what's happening in our home, or just watch the way they model it. So much of parenting and fathering is more caught than taught. I think of our friend Pastor John and his wife Helen Burns. They really were a season ahead of us, and they helped us with, when it came to fathering, he encouraged me to take you on dates and the rest of our children on dates. And that little piece of advice was huge for us. So I'd encourage people, have somebody who's a season ahead of you that's doing a good job. It won't be perfect, but they're doing a good job. And look for those models that can help you to see what's to come. Even now in our life, we have other people in our life we pray for and say, who can help us in the next season of life to father well, to parent well?
That's such great advice. And I know even for me, that's something that, because you've told me that to pray for that's something that I continue to believe God for our kids. And God's always so faithful to bring those people in different seasons that are good examples for Mike and I, but also even good examples for our kids to look up to. So God's really faithful to answer that. I love that. Okay, I have a question. What is the most challenging thing about being a father for you, or maybe the most challenging moment that you had as a father?
It relates to that, Jen. The most challenging thing I find, and I think a lot of dads would agree, is when your children get to that place where they are now walking in their own faith. You've taught them, you've done your best to bring them up, and then the challenging point is really that release. I think for any parent, remember that psalm that says children are like arrows in the hand of a warrior. You point them to the target, but there's a day comes where you have to release that. That's a challenging moment for a dad. Okay, I've taught them their manners. I've taught them responsibility. I've tried to train them from when I taught them to how to ride a bike to how to open up a bank account. I taught them how to pray. I taught them what I knew, and now they're on their own. And I think that's the challenging moment. The day the student, drives off for university, or the day the son or the daughter gets married, or the day that they enter into for their first job, and you're releasing them, and you kind of stand back. You can't interfere. No longer can you run and pick them up. They're on their own. And so that's a challenging moment as a dad. And you really have to stand back and say, okay, God, I entrust them into your hands. And I know that they're going to make it, but it is a challenging moment for fathers.
You said something where you said, no longer can I go and pick them up. Because that's what we do as parents. It's like, hey, I'm here to help you. And I can see how, I haven't been there yet, but I can see how that would be really challenging, where the love that you have for your child doesn't change. And maybe you see them fall and you're like, oh, I just want to fix it, or I want to be there to help them. What do you do when you see that happen and you can't interfere and you can't step in, or maybe they don't want you to step in?
Great question, Jan. Number one, pray. That's what we do. You go back and you pray for them. And I think, it's not like you can, but before, when a child is 14 and they have an issue, you step in whether they like it or not. No, you're gonna clean your room. You have no choice in this. But later on in life, when they're now on their own, now as a dad, I wait for them to come to me, or I ask, can I help you with this? I'm seeing something. I ask for permission because they're an adult, and I have to respect them as an adult. I think that shift from child to an adult is a very important shift, and it's different for every situation, but I really have to respect them. I think one of the keys to fathering is to respect every child as a human being and recognize the value, the worth that they have. We would like our children to honor us, but we also are to honor, respect, and value them. And if fathers can do that, I think that makes for them to rise up and to be all that God's called them to be. Jack Frost, in his book Experiencing a Father's Embrace, he writes that children look to fathers to meet 4 emotional needs: the need for unconditional love, the need to feel secure and comforted, the need for praise and affirmation, and the need for purpose in life. Those are huge. And I think as fathers will think about that, be intentional about that, that will make that stage of life, moving into that chapter, easier. I know my purpose. I know my dad loves me unconditionally. I always feel secure. I feel safe. My dad comforts me. He praises me. He affirms me. Do you remember the words that the Heavenly Father spoke over Jesus? 2 times that the Father speaks, he says, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." Those are words that every child wants to hear from their daddy, whether they're a little girl, little boy, or whether they're a grown man or grown woman. They still want to hear those things. So some things will go through all our life. I think you can constantly give your children, no matter what season, unconditional love, comfort them, praise them, affirm them, continue to say, man, you have a purpose for life. That happens to all the seasons of life.
We could stop right there. That's so good. That's really good. And you had said something too, when they're older, you need to invite yourself or ask for permission to help them or to come into their life. And I would think the freedom for them to say yes and give you that permission to come into their life really starts when our kids are younger and going on those dates, doing those 4 things that you just talked about, really investing into a relationship. Because if we don't invest into a relationship with our kids when they're young, it's harder, I would imagine, when they're older, that trust and that security of allowing your parents to speak into your life, it won't be there the same way.
I think you're right, Jen. I think it has to start when we're younger, building that foundation, those relationships. And, if people are listening, say, well, I didn't do that. I got off to a bad start. It's not too late. I find that children at any age are pretty resilient. And when they're loved, when we appreciate them and just, there's a verse in Malachi chapter 4, verse 6 that says that the heart of the father is turned to the children. And then it says the children's heart is turned to the father. The father has to initiate it. The father has to take the first step at any age. Even if they're older, the father has to initiate that. And children will respond and come back. Sometimes it's harder, of course, if there's been a lot of things in the past. But if a dad continues to pray and love never fails. And sadly, we live in a world where there's been the damage of fathers not loving, of not comforting and praising and helping their children with their purpose in life. The stats are amazing. 90% of runaway children come from fatherless homes. 80% of rapists come from fatherless homes. 75% of drug addicts come from fatherless homes. 71% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. And if you go into prisons, which we've often done, go into prisons, most of the guys in prison come from homes without a dad. So it's hard to understate the importance of fathers loving their children through the whole journey of life and just staying there to encourage them. And it's God put it in our heart to do it. So we do it by his grace and by his strength.
That's amazing. There's a lot in our culture, and there should be, because moms are incredible, that supports the value and the role of a mom. But you see often in advertising or in commercials, especially more recently, the role of the father is put down. Maybe it's a little joke, or he's kind of downplayed or cast aside, and it's like, the mom's amazing. And I'm not disregarding that moms are great. But sometimes it feels like in culture, dads aren't as affirmed or valued as moms are. And how can wives support their husbands in their God-given role as a father? Because in order for a dad to be all that God has called him to be, and our kids need strong dads, as you just said, what can wives or, our church community, how can we support dads to be the best that God has called them to be?
One, Jen, I think honor the father. One of the things that your mother does well is she'll always speak words of affirmation in front of the children about me. So that's one of the things that a wife can do, is in front of the children, you speak well all the time of your spouse. He's a great man. And even if it's just joking, boy, look at those big muscles, or your dad's so kind. Find ways to affirm him in front of the children. And of course you want to do it with authenticity, but those affirming words are so important. A wife can do that. That doesn't mean you have, some talks, some conversations where, we need to talk about issues, but in front of children, in front of others, be affirming. In public, be affirming. One of the things that Cheryl and I said early on in our marriage, which has served us very well, we made an agreement we would never speak negative about the other person when we're out and about. We would honor them. I grew up, as some of your listeners would know, and you would know, growing up in the oil industry, which is a very rough industry. And oftentimes I heard the guys talking very negative about their wife. They'd say, my old lady and things. And I thought, I'm never going to say that about Cheryl. I am going to affirm her. And they'd be talking. They say, what about you, Koop? What about your wife? And I go, she's amazing. She's an amazing mother. And I would praise her. And I think as much as we read in Proverbs 31, how children rise up and call the woman blessed, dads need that just as much. So a wife can do that. And I think another thing that a wife can do in helping her husband in the role of a father is just take interest in his world. A man, is if a guy, let's say he likes to golf, just take interest in it. Hey, you got out, you got away, you were out golfing. How was that? Take interest, just like you did when you were dating. You were interested in his world. You were interested in what he drove, what he did, his hobbies, what he liked to do. And I think as life goes along, we can wane away from that. So it's great to stay connected and be interested, speak words of affirmation. When he does something right, say, that was really good. Johnny really appreciated when you said that. You made such an impact in his life when you did that. Or thank you for taking the kids for a walk today. They have a good dad. Though he may never even verbalize to his wife how much that means to him, but it means so much. Really, women hold their husbands in the palm of their hand, and they can make or break that man. And when it comes to the role of fathering, really important that they have affirmation and encouragement from, and an interest, a genuine interest in his life and what he's doing. Stay interested, stay affirming. That'll go a long ways.
Wow, that's so good. Okay, this maybe is on a little bit of a lighter side with that, but what do you think husbands wish their wives knew about fatherhood?
What I think husbands wish their wives knew about fatherhood. That's an interesting question. What do I wish they knew about fatherhood?
Is there anything surprising that be like, oh, as a wife, I had no idea that they felt that way or it was like that for them?
I think one thing that, and I don't know if I'm speaking for all the guys, so if you're a guy listening out there, you might have something different, but for me, and just what I know from talking with other fathers and living life, I think guys like to know that when men are working and we're doing our role, we're wired to provide, we're wired to protect. And so I think they would love to know that when we are doing our work, our providing, that we are loving deeply. This is like sometimes a wife will say, boy, if he would just do this, that compare him to some romantic guy, but for him, washing the car for her, or for him going to work, he's saying, I'm really loving my wife doing this. And for him, he's loving deeply when he's providing and helping out. And maybe he hasn't verbalized it or expressed it as romantically as somebody else. But I think they'd want their wives to know that when I'm doing this, I'm loving deeply. I'm really caring about you. This is me caring for you. This is me saying I love you.
That's so good. I think sometimes even for me, Mike will do something, like he'll fix something for me. Like he'll fix if something's broken in the house, for example. He'll go and he'll fix it. He'll take care of it. He'll go buy the part. He'll go to Home Depot. He'll do it. And I've been guilty of being like, oh, awesome, thanks. Like, so glad you took care of that. And he's like, you didn't notice. And for him, that was his way of saying, like you said, I'm taking care of you. Like, I fixed the broken door. Like, I love you. I went to get the part and, made that happen. And it is an expression of love for us, for our kids. He's thinking like, even sometimes if my chair is squeaky, he'll get out what is the spray, the WD-40, and he'll spray my chair. And sometimes I won't notice it. He's like, you didn't notice your chair's not squeaky? Like, I was loving you by not giving you a squeaky chair. And so sometimes you're right. It's those little things and I miss it. And really, whether it's for me or for the kids, he's expressing love through those acts of provision, really, and taking care of us.
That's it. Because what's going through the guy's mind when he puts some oil on the chair, or when he's doing an errand or whatever it might be, what's going through his mind is this: they're going to like this. This is going to make it better. They're going to enjoy this. How can I make this a better place for them. That's what's going through their mind. They're thinking about you, even subconsciously. This is going to help them. We're going to be able to go on a holiday because I did this, or I got the boat ready and I polished it up. I got all the things ready to go water skiing or go canoeing, and my family's going to have fun. This is going to be a memory. That's what's going in the back of his mind, is his care. He's loving. So, yeah, that would be, I think, something that husbands wish their wives knew about fatherhood. Like, we're really loving deeply when we do something like that.
I love that. Okay, one last question before we wrap up. As a pastor and a dad, what is one piece of advice that you wish to leave with those who are listening?
Well, in Deuteronomy, there Moses is instructing the people, and he tells them to get it in your own heart and then get it into your children's heart. So my piece of instruction would be, good fathering starts with getting it into your own heart, and then you can get into your children's heart. You can't father well unless you have this deep connection with God. And, fathering, it's kind of like balance in a way. Balance on a bike. If I'm riding a bike, my word would be to father well, be to balance. If I want to ride a bike, I have to get on and look ahead. If I look down, very hard to have balance. And so a good father has a vision. Like riding a bike, you have a vision for your family. Good fathering has a vision for your marriage, a vision for your children, a vision for where you're going. Just like riding a bike, you have to look ahead to have that. And then you have to be in motion. Very hard to balance a bike if you're standing still. But once I'm in motion, then there's balance. And fathers, they need to have faith and action, just like Abraham, to move ahead. And then to ride a bike, I need to kind of connect with the bike. I have to lean into the corners. So my word for it is that balance, a balanced life with God, balance in my family, just like riding a bike. And when you're doing that, it's beautiful. Fathering, it's not burdensome any more than riding a bike is. But you have to do some simple things. Have vision, get in motion, get a plan, do it, stay connected with it, and you'll find it's as fun as riding a bike is.
Wow. Dad, I could just keep talking to you about this. I even as we're talking, I have 100 other questions going through my mind. But for the sake of time, we need to wrap it up. But I think we definitely need to do this again. This has been so fun. Thank you for coming and doing a Father's Day podcast with me.
Hey, my pleasure, Jen. It's an amazing podcast, and we're cheering you on, and thank you for the honor of being on.
Before we go, I think it would be wonderful if you could pray for all the moms and dads who are listening. Would you do that?
Of course. Heavenly Father, we do pray for every mother who's listening to this. And I pray for those that right now are maybe perhaps thinking, my husband should be doing this or that. God, would you grace them to love their husbands, to encourage their husbands, to have the word to say, and to just show affirmation and encouragement for that man who's doing his best to serve his family. Lord, would you be with the dads that are listening? Would you help them to rise up and to enjoy fathering and to have the balance that they need, that it would be as enjoyable as riding a bike. Sometimes hard work, but they'd be enjoying it, and that you would grace them for the work that they're doing. And above all else, Father, whether it be a mother or a dad that's listening, would you go with them? There's so many different contexts, but you've promised in your word that you'd always go with us. Would you guide them? Would you lead them? Heavenly Father, you are the ultimate Father, the perfect example. So may you guide and lead each one of us. We ask in Jesus' name.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Raising Mom. If this episode was encouraging to you, we ask that you would share it with a friend. Remember to subscribe so you never miss a future episode.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Raising Mom, a ministry of Coastal Church. Remember to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. Follow us on Instagram at Raising Mom Podcast to connect with a community of like-minded moms. To learn more about who we are and what we do, pop on over to coastalchurch.org.